What would you do if an ordinary night suddenly turned into a fight for survival? A quiet gas station, three strangers, eyes full of suspicion, a gentle threat hiding a deadly danger. They thought they had chosen the right target. They didn't know they had just challenged a true warrior. In an instant, everything changed. From prey to predator, from target to nightmare. Jack wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found him. So what happened next? How did the three attackers end up begging for mercy? Can you guess the outcome of this story? Keep watching until the end to see the valuable lesson they received. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like this? Don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Jack drove along the endless highway, the streetlights blurring past like faint streaks of light. The long trip had left him tired, but his mind remained sharp as ever. He was used to the silence. Outside, the night was pitch black, with only a few cars passing by. When the lights of a roadside gas station appeared ahead, he decided to stop. Not because he was tired, but because he knew the most important thing on long drives was to always be ready. The car slowly pulled up to a pump, the engine humming quietly. Jack stretched, took a deep breath. The smell of gasoline, the damp Louisiana air, the scent of an ordinary night. Or was it? A convenience store emitted a faint fluorescent light. A few other cars quietly parked nearby. Everything seemed normal, but Jack didn't just look. He sensed. And right then, something made his instincts flare. A gaze, a movement in the shadows. Something wasn't right. Jack didn't react immediately. He just stood there, pumping gas, as if this was just an ordinary moment. But he knew. The storm was coming. Jack didn't need to turn around to know someone was watching him. Three men, three motorcycles parked at the edge of the parking lot, three quiet, calculating gazes. They weren't in a hurry, no need to rush. A good prey doesn't run off immediately. It needs confidence. It needs patience. Jack looked through the car window, observing the reflection. The leader had a faded tattoo on his arm, a graying beard, signs of a man who had done this many times before. The other two stood behind him, exchanging knowing glances. The hunt had begun. Jack kept his breathing steady, his hand firmly holding the gas pump. He didn't show any signs of alertness. It wasn't necessary, but in his mind, every detail had been analyzed. Footsteps approaching, light but unmistakable. A voice spoke, full of amusement. "Nice car, buddy." Jack slowly turned around, locking eyes with the leader. They thought he was the prey. They were about to learn the harsh truth. Jack didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the leader, letting him feel the weight of his silence. The man smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the grin of someone who was all too familiar with making others bend to their will. "You're lost, buddy," he said, his tone amused but carrying an underlying threat. "This isn't a friendly area." Jack still didn't react, continuing to pump gas as if the conversation didn't concern him. This annoyed the man. He raised an eyebrow, glancing down at Jack's hoodie pocket, where the edge of his wallet peeked out. "It's a long night, and we could use some encouragement. Maybe you can give us a hand?" A familiar move, a suggestion that didn't allow for refusal. Jack exhaled lightly. They thought he was scared. He looked directly into the man's eyes, his voice calm. "I don't think you want to do this." Not a threat, not a plea, just a simple truth. But the man didn't understand. He only knew he'd made a big mistake. These weren't random guys. They'd chosen him, not because he was an easy target, but because they thought so. Their first mistake. Jack stayed there, finishing up pumping gas. But in his mind, he had already calculated everything. Leader. He was experienced, not quick to anger. He wanted to control the situation, apply psychological pressure before striking. The other two, one was short but kept glancing nervously behind. Uneasy. The other was taller but didn't dare step forward, waiting for orders. Three predators, but not all on the same level. Jack let the silence stretch long enough to make them uneasy. The leader chuckled softly. "I just gave you a chance, buddy." Jack stared straight into his eyes, cold, but not provoking. "You just gave me a reason." The leader furrowed his brow. He didn't understand, but Jack knew. The next moment would change everything. The leader didn't wait any longer. He smirked, nodding to signal. The smaller one lunged forward. Mistake! Jack moved in an instant, stepping aside, grabbing his wrist, twisting it back behind him. A sharp crack echoed. The man screamed, the sound tearing through the air. 2 seconds. The taller man flinched but reacted instinctively. He threw a punch straight for Jack's face. Jack didn't dodge. He took the hit. His hand tightened on the man's wrist in midair, pulling him forward and landing a hard elbow into his ribs. The man staggered, gasping for breath. The second punch never came. Jack had finished him before he even had a chance to think about it. 1 second. The leader froze. He had seen enough. But when his hand went into his coat, maybe a knife, maybe a gun, Jack moved. A precise punch. Fast. Hard. The man dropped to the sidewalk. Jack stood still. Not a drop of sweat. 3 attackers. 3 seconds. The fight was over before it even started. Everything was dead silent. The 3 men were down, one clutching his dislocated arm, groaning in pain, another still gasping for air, his hand pressed against his broken ribs. The leader lay motionless, his eyes wide open in disbelief at what had just happened. No one moved. No more arrogance, no more smug smiles, just the silence of defeat. Jack looked down at them, his gaze devoid of hatred or pity. He knew the type of men they were. They thought they controlled the game. They thought they were the stronger ones. They didn't know they had picked the wrong opponent. Jack bent down, his voice steady but cold. I gave you a chance to walk away. The leader swallowed hard, his eyes now filled with real fear. He was used to being the strongest, but now he was just a weak man lying on cold concrete. Jack stood upright, taking a deep breath. The fight was over, but the story of tonight was just beginning. The atmosphere around him became strangely heavy. Jack no longer paid attention to the 3 groaning men on the concrete. He could feel the eyes around him. The old man by the truck stood frozen, still gripping the gas pump, as if forgetting what he was doing. His eyes were wide open, unsure whether he had just witnessed a real fight or an action movie scene. Inside the car, the woman in the driver's seat had stopped scrolling through her phone, but now her phone was pointed at Jack, recording everything that had just happened. No one spoke, but their silence spoke volumes. A convenience store employee stood behind the glass, mouth slightly open, phone in hand, also recording. Instinctively, Jack understood. Tonight wouldn't just end here. No one here could forget what they had just witnessed. But more importantly, the world outside would soon know about it. What had occurred was no longer a secret. The sound of sirens broke the silence of the gas station. Red and blue lights flashed across the street, reflecting off the cars, illuminating the faces of the witnesses. Jack remained standing, unshaken. He knew this process all too well. A police investigation, a series of questions, maybe a few hours at the station if things were misunderstood. 2 officers stepped out of the car, their eyes quickly scanning the scene. 3 thieves groaning on the concrete, bystanders with phones out recording, and Jack, standing in the middle, not a scratch on him. What happened here? One of the officers asked, his tone cautious. Before Jack could speak, the woman from the car stepped out. She still held her phone, but now her gaze was firmer than ever. I recorded everything. He was just defending himself. She turned the screen toward the officers, playing back the footage of the 3 men attacking Jack first. The officer stared at the video, then looked up, his gaze a little relieved. Jack didn't need to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. The leader wasn't done yet. He braced himself on his elbow, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes still gleamed with cunning. He attacked us first, he said, his voice hoarse but still trying to convince them. We were just defending ourselves. One of the officers raised his hand to stop him. He was no longer patient with the lies. Really? The officer asked, skepticism in his voice. What about this knife? He bent down, picking up a gleaming dagger from the ground, just inches from the leader. The man froze. No more excuses. No more chances to turn the situation around. The officer looked toward Jack. His expression clearly changed. No longer cautious, no longer suspicious. Only acknowledgement. You're free to go, he said shortly. Jack didn't say anything, just nodded. He didn't need any further explanation. The truth had protected itself. Meanwhile, the leader hung his head, realizing that tonight hadn't ended the way he had imagined. The officer turned to Jack, his gaze a mix of respect and curiosity. "Do you want to press charges against them?" His voice was calm, but it was clear he was ready to take action if Jack nodded. Jack paused for a moment. He glanced over the three men lying on the concrete. They were no longer a threat. The leader was still gasping for air, but his gaze had lost its arrogance. The other two were keeping their heads down, avoiding Jack's eyes as if they had just realized the huge mistake they had made. Jack could drag this out. He could have them thrown in jail, teach them a lesson they'd never forget in the worst possible way. But it wasn't necessary. He took a deep breath, then shook his head. "Number, I just want to leave." The officer nodded. No argument. He understood. Jack turned and walked away, not looking back once. He didn't need a victory, because from the very beginning, he had never been the one to lose. Jack drove away from the gas station, leaving behind the flashing police lights and the men who had just tried to rob him. To him, it was over, but the world outside didn't think so. At a small coffee shop a few miles away, a young woman placed her phone down on the table, eyes wide in disbelief. She had just posted a video less than 2 minutes long, but within 10 minutes, the views had skyrocketed. The headline was short but attention-grabbing. "Three bikers picked the wrong opponent and paid the price." The video started with the three men approaching Jack, their tone threatening, confident that they had control of the situation. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. One precise punch, one quick takedown. The three attackers were on the ground before they even realized what had happened. Comments flooded in. "Amazing! Someone finally taught these punks a lesson." He didn't start the fight, but when he was threatened, he responded. Fast and accurate. "Now that's real self-defense. Someone find out who this guy is. I want to shake his hand." But not everyone agreed. Did he really need to take them down that quickly? Was that really necessary? Three thieves were clearly in the wrong, but the way he reacted, it seemed a bit too professional. Is he a vet or a hitman? If the roles were reversed, would we be protecting the attacker? The social media world exploded with thousands of conflicting opinions. Jack still had no idea what was happening. But one thing was certain, this story had gone far beyond the roadside gas station. The next morning, Jack woke up to a flood of messages and missed calls. Friends, former teammates, even people he hadn't been in touch with for a while, all had the same question. "Jack, what's going on?" He opened his phone and was immediately overwhelmed. The screen was flooded with headlines. "The mysterious man takes down three robbers in seconds. Who is he? Self-defense or excessive violence?" The internet is divided. Veteran or undercover hitman? The truth about the man in the viral video? On TV, a news report was replaying the footage from the gas station. The scene of Jack handling the three attackers was shown over and over, set to dramatic music. The reporter spoke in a dramatic tone. "We are witnessing impressive self-defense. Or is this an individual with dangerously advanced skills?" Jack closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath. He never wanted to be the center of attention, but now the story was no longer in his control. Jack never imagined that one night could change his life. But that's exactly what was happening. In just 24 hours, his name had flooded news websites, forums, and social media. Someone had tracked down his identity. Jack, a former soldier, combat training expert, living in Baton Rouge. And then, his phone rang. "Jack, it's me, Carter." The voice on the other end was not as friendly as usual. "I've gotten a ton of emails and calls from the press. Jack, this is not the kind of attention the company wants." Jack gripped the phone tightly, closing his eyes for a moment. He knew this would come. "I didn't ask for this attention." "But it's here, Jack," Carter sighed. "And now we have to suspend you, at least until things die down." His job, the peaceful life he had built after leaving the military. Now it was all turned upside down because of one video. Jack set the phone down on the table, feeling a storm brewing, and this time, he couldn't just beat it with his fists. Jack sat motionless in the chair, staring at the phone screen. Messages from friends, old teammates, even strangers filled his inbox. But one message made him stop. "Mom, are you okay? Call me as soon as you can." Jack took a deep breath and hit the call button. After just 2 rings, his mom picked up. "Jack!" Her voice came through, filled with worry. "What's going on? I've been watching the news. They're talking about you everywhere." Jack closed his eyes, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, I didn't ask for this. It was just one bad night, and someone happened to record it. But now everyone knows who you are. They're digging up your past, what you've done, where you've worked." She paused, her voice trembling. "Jack, I'm just scared. You won't have a normal life anymore." He could feel the fear in her every word. A mother just wanting her son to have a peaceful life, not to be the subject of controversy all across America. Jack sighed, looking out the window. His mom might be right. Jack scrolled through the articles, social media comments, and then realized a terrifying truth. He was no longer himself in the eyes of the world. There were headlines calling him a hero. Veteran takes down 3 robbers in seconds. An unbelievable performance. But there were also articles labeling him as a dangerous, violent man. Did Jack really just defend himself? Or is this an overzealous man who used excessive force? The truth no longer mattered. What mattered was which story more people believed. Jack placed his phone down on the table, feeling a sense of helplessness rise within him for the first time. He had only acted in self-defense, but now people were turning him into a symbol of every debate about violence, justice, and morality. He couldn't control how they saw him. He couldn't stop them from drawing conclusions based on a few seconds of video. Jack let out a bitter laugh. A street fight might end in seconds, but a battle on the internet could last forever. Jack stared at the phone screen, the blue light flickering in his eyes. Notifications kept popping up, comments, messages, posts, all about him. People were debating his life without knowing a thing about it. He took a deep breath, then turned on the camera. "I've stayed silent, but maybe it's time to say something." His voice was steady, not angry, not defensive, just a man speaking the truth. "I'm not a hero, and I'm not a violent man. I'm just someone who didn't want to become a victim." He looked directly into the camera. 3 men approached me that night. They thought I was an easy target. I wasn't looking for trouble, but I wasn't going to let myself get hurt. I have no regrets about what I did, but if there was another way, I would have preferred not to fight at all. He paused, letting his words sink in. "If you watch that video and think I'm a hero, remember, I'm just an ordinary guy protecting myself. And if you think I went too far, ask yourself, if you were in my position, what would you have done?" He hit the upload button. Now the world would hear his story from his own mouth. Less than an hour after Jack posted the video, views started skyrocketing. At first, it was just old followers, teammates, friends who had served with him. But then, it spread faster than he imagined. 100,000 views, 250,000 views, over 500,000 in just one night. Comments flooded in. Some thanked him for speaking out. Others admitted they had rushed to judgment. "We really don't know what happened beyond a few seconds of a clipped video. He's not bragging or trying to prove anything, just a guy protecting himself." But there were also those who refused to accept the truth. So if he's so strong, why didn't he run instead of fighting? The media always sensationalizes. Now everyone's turning this into a debate. Jack wasn't surprised. He had seen this before. The way the media could turn a person into a symbol, a story into a public battle. But this time he didn't stay silent. His truth had been spoken. And for the first time, there were people actually listening. Jack never wanted to be the center of attention. He wasn't a hero, nor was he a violent man. He was just a man who refused to become a victim. But society today doesn't work in such simple terms. People like to see stories from the perspective they choose. Some people continued to praise Jack as a symbol of courage. Others saw him as a dangerous man, someone who should have restrained himself more. But one thing was undeniable. The truth had to be told by the person involved. Jack's video wasn't just a statement that he was defending himself. It was a wake-up call. In a world where everything can be twisted through just a few seconds of video, where public opinion quickly jumps to conclusions before understanding the full story, we need to listen more and judge less. Jack knew that after all this, his life would never be the same. But he had no regrets, because he did what was right. And sometimes speaking the truth, no matter who believes it or not, is powerful enough to change everything. Jack's story is a powerful reminder that in a world of quick judgments, the truth always needs to come from the person involved. With just a short video, society can turn an ordinary person into a hero or a criminal without knowing the full context. But the truth isn't always simple, and what we see isn't always the whole story. Jack wasn't looking for trouble, but when pushed into a position where he had to defend himself, he did the right thing. That didn't make him violent, nor did it turn him into a legendary figure. It simply proved that the right to self-defense is important and should be respected. The most important lesson? Don't rush to judge someone based on a narrow perspective. The internet can distort the truth. The media can push things further than reality. But we, the ones listening to the story, have a responsibility to view everything fairly and objectively. And sometimes standing up to protect yourself isn't a choice, but a necessity.